Hey everyone. So, can you imagine a compound like DMT, in addition to all these mental illnesses like depression and anxiety, it actually could treat glaucoma? How? Find out in my latest podcast. This is the Dales Report, and happy to be joined on the podcast here today, the CEO of PharmaDrug, Daniel Cohen, back to the podcast. It's been a while.
Wow.
What's it
Been a while.
since?
It's good to be back, though.
I know it's been since September.
Yeah, I think so.
Got the hoodies on now, and got the blazers on. It's like summer's short and simple in Canada, is it not?
Yes, it is.
Well, let's get an update. As I said, it's been a while. We begin with PharmaDrug. Last time we talked, you were granted back in September a pre-IND meeting with the FDA for the clinical development of your patented formulation of Cepharanthine, which is an oral antiviral pill as a potential treatment for mild to moderate COVID-19. So wanted to quick ask, what is the timeline as to when you might get a response from the FDA and see how that's progressing?
Any minute now.
Oh,
no.
Okay.
They told us the end of November. So it's actually it could be in the next few days. It could be in the next couple of weeks. By the end of November, we're gonna get the response, and that might involve some back and forth. But yeah, we'll have some clarity, and we should. I mean, it's the FDA. If they decide to delay it, it's out of our control. But they don't usually delay. So we should have an update by the end of November. So that's coming soon. So once again, that's to use our pill as treatment for mild to moderate COVID, and we're pretty excited about it. There's been a lot of work done by many groups, and another one just came out recently that we kind of sent out to our mailing list, where there was a group that did a study on 5 different drugs, and COVID came out. Cepharanthine came out at the top, and it was actually not just in regular COVID. It was actually on the South African variant, where it had the strongest performance.
Right.
So
I saw that.
We're excited to be able to take this into the clinic. So we'll see. We're waiting to hear the feedback from the FDA, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, it's interesting how these antiviral pills are really gaining a lot of momentum. Do you expect that you'll receive favorable review from the FDA to allow the study to move forward?
Yeah, no, we do. I mean, the question it's not, look, if there was no merit, then they would have just turned us down. So it's not a question of whether there's merit or not. The question becomes, do you go to phase 2? Do you go to phase 1? Or do you need to do a little bit more work just to check off the boxes before you head into the clinic? So that's the type of feedback we're waiting for. It's not about what does it make sense or not. It's more of the, it's like we've said many times, it's been in use in Japan for 70 years. And so we know it's safe. The question is, how much of that data is the FDA willing to accept versus how much do they need to get done, in a lab more recently in the United States.
Right.
And so that's what we're waiting on.
What's your thoughts on Merck and Pfizer, who are granted EUA for their own antiviral COVID pills and to treat early COVID symptoms? They're the early leaders, to say the least, but what kind of demand I guess, is there for, say, something like Cepharanthine?
I think it's huge, man. At the end of the day, not every pill is going to be a solve-all. There will be different pills used for different situations. Different variants will ask for different pills.
Yeah.
I don't see it. I don't see it unfolding like a situation where you would have only one pill and that's the panacea. We don't need anything else. Nobody needs a vaccine. There's one pill. I think there'll be needs for several different pills for several different types of COVID, and who knows? We may continue to see variants. And the thing about, Cepharanthine is that we think it could be very useful for other respiratory, viruses, whether it's MERS or SARS and things of that sort. So I think what the whole situation has shown us is that we need more antiviral pills.
Of course.
We were caught without any in our repertoire, right? As whether it's Canada or the US or the world, right? So I think there's great need for more than one.
COVID's not going away, and I think people need to understand, especially investors. Please understand there's not one pill that's going to fix all problems, correct?
Yes, exactly. That's something that really needs to be understood. There are different types of COVID. There are variants. There's different severities. There's early onset. There's further in. There's many different ways in which pills can be used and many different types of pills that can be used.
Yeah. Well, you touched on some of the other effects that cepharanthine has, its effectiveness, treating certain cancers as well, something that we spoke about in the past. Cepharanthine recently demonstrated preclinical potential as a monotherapy in treating cancers with unsuitable treatment options. So where does the research go next based off of this?
Well, we what we did was a 3-step preclinical, trial. The first one, the first 2 were in the dish, and we got, some significant results in terms of cepharanthine being very, having high potential to be able to treat many different cancers. But the one that we've been focusing on the most so far has been esophageal cancer. There are 2 or 3 other cancers that we think are really good candidates. So what we're doing now is we have an update that should be coming in the next little while, definitely before the end of November, where, we kind of box off and end the, in the dish studies and really announce to the market, we've started the animal studies. These are the cancers we're going after. This is how we're structuring the animal study. The animal study is extremely important for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it's always more, it's always better data to get an animal study versus in the dish, because the animal is more complex and more like, an actual living body. Secondly, we've often talked about cepharanthine's potential and one of its greatest potentials is to reduce chemoresistance. And specifically in esophageal cancer, where one of the biggest problems in terms of esophageal cancer not being treated properly is that it develops a strong resistance to chemo. Now, the second test we did was a combination test to look at not just cepharanthine alone, chemo alone, but we also combined the chemo and the cepharanthine to see how they work together. But what I guess wasn't properly explained was that we were looking for synergies between the two, but the reality is that in the dish, you didn't have enough time for the cancer to develop that chemo resistance.
Okay.
So the animal study is actually going to be specifically designed to be able to have certain, we're going to be doing it in mice, to have certain mice that's going to have that chemo resistance build up. And then we apply the cepharanthine with the chemo together to see if the cepharanthine can bring down the resistance that the cancer has to the chemo. So it's going to be
when do you expect the research to enter into a clinical stage?
Well, we got to get the results from the animal studies, and then we'll prepare for clinical stage. I mean, that's probably going to be somewhere, mid 2022. But between now and then, we're going to have lots of very, very important results, right? So you get the results in January, February, right? Maybe March as well, because we're going to do, several different stages to that animal study. Then you got to get all that information together, and then you got to go through the whole pre-IND, IND process. So it takes time, but that doesn't mean that it's not. We don't have added value results between now and then. So lots of information to be coming, lots of data. And lots of reasons to get more excited about cepharanthine, we believe, for cancer.
Wanted to ask, I was in Miami last week for the biggest psychedelic conference ever held. A lot of excitement out there. A lot of institutions very, very interested in psychedelics. They think a lot of insurance companies are going to have their own psychedelic division within the next 3 years. You saw Compass's endpoints results last week. So mixed of feelings, mixed feedback on what people thought about it. But most importantly, where do you think we are as far as an industry as a whole, knowing that we were waiting for this catalyst moment? What do you think is in store as we head into 2022?
I think there's a lot that's still on the come. I think that Compass's results maybe in the short term seem like a negative, but to me they were positive in the longer term. At the end of the day, it's not.
What do you mean by that? I agree with you, but what do you mean by that?
I never thought, and many people agreed. Many people were of the opinion that it wasn't going to be one study structured in one way that was going to give us the panacea and the answer to everything, right? And at the end of the day, we need to start with the end and work backwards because it's helpful. Does psilocybin help with depression? There's good reason to believe that it does. And so let's step right into the clinic and see. Let's test psilocybin on depression, but there's so many different types of depression, and there's ways in which we use psilocybin. You use it by itself. You use it with another drug. Do you use it combined with therapy? There's so much more depth there that needs to be addressed, and I don't think that one study is going to address all that. That's number one. But number two, which is core to our strategy, is that we also believe that you need to start from the beginning, not just from the end, meaning that there are several psychedelics that everyone's looking at, or the whole industry is looking at, whether it's psilocybin, LSD, MDMA, DMT for us, and all the analogs and reformulations, and whatnot. Do we understand how they actually function in the body? Right?
Yeah.
And so let's understand the mechanism of action for all of these drugs and understand how they affect the physiology, the human physiology, how they affect the biochemistry of the body. And once we understand all of that, then it becomes easier to apply that to certain sicknesses.
Right.
And that's something that we're very focused on. That takes time. It takes time, right? So that's one of the things that we're doing with Johns Hopkins University. We're looking at, mechanism of action for DMT. How does it work? We're going after healthy humans, and we're going to use DMT. We're going to use another psychedelic that we haven't mentioned the name. We're going to look at different doses, and we're going to look at switching the type of drug on each person. So after each person gets each drug at a different time, at a different dosage, not only will they go through psychological assessments, which are standardized, but we're also going to do brain imaging. So the reason why we chose the other psychedelic, and we haven't mentioned it, not because it's significant, but because we want it to be a blind study, so we don't want it to be known what the other one is. There's a belief that other psychedelic actually affects a different receptor. So really understanding, okay, we gave DMT at different doses. This is how the person behaved afterwards, but also the brain imaging. This is the receptor it hit. This is what happened after the brain, after the receptor, received the DMT and the other drug. So understanding all of that mechanism makes it easier to know what we can use these drugs for. It's understanding a whole new class of drugs, and that type of foundational work needs to be done. And I think that work is going to add a lot of intelligence to the whole industry, to medicine as a whole. But that's a lot of work that needs to be done by many companies and many groups. Well, so I'm very excited about where we're going to go. But people need to understand it's going to take time. Right?
Yeah. Talk about other compounds. Let's talk glaucoma. You most recently announced that the Terasaki Institute for Biomedical Innovation will immediately commence in vitro characterization, studies on your shortlist of DMT analog molecules. So break it down for me and my audience. What does that mean, and why should investors take note?
So, we're doing all this foundational work, like we talked about. We've been doing work with the University of Michigan. We're looking to start a clinical trial with Johns Hopkins University. But we also wanted a commercial strategy. Like, we got to develop a drug that we can actually make money on. We can't just do this R&D for the sake of R&D.
Yeah.
And so what we did is we took the DMT. We had a better understanding of how DMT works. And we specifically looked for receptors that respond to DMT, and receptors that respond to DMT that can be used to treat a sickness that is not currently being treated properly. And so it was all of that internal research that we did that led us to glaucoma, or specific types of glaucoma. That's
incredible, isn't it? Like, normally you wouldn't associate like a powerful psychedelic like DMT with having a positive effect on a condition like glaucoma. So, maybe explain the buzz surrounding this and what you've kind of found or learned.
So we weren't actually the first ones to discover this. There was an actual pharmaceutical or a biotech company in the 90s that tried to use DMT, to treat glaucoma. They ended up hitting a wall. I think it's because they might have been, I'm not sure exactly why. I think they were administering it orally, which had some issues and things of that sort. But, we came across the research, and we came up with the idea that, what if we, administered it topically and at psychotropic levels, right? And then we could be able to potentially treat glaucoma, or the specific type of glaucoma that we're focused on. So there are treatments for glaucoma. I don't want to mischaracterize that, but not all glaucomas get taken care of. Lots of people go blind every year from glaucoma.
Yeah.
And so there are drops that people use, but they cause irritation. People forget to put the drops in. People don't put the drops in at night, and the pressure builds up because there's a certain nerve that builds up pressure, and that's what ends up causing the damage to the eye.
Yes.
So at night people aren't putting the drops in. So we figured, okay, let's come up with a specific version of DMT that has the maximum, from one perspective, the optimal amount of potency and duration, how much it affects the receptor pathway, and how long it affects it for. That combined with what has the least reaction with the eye, right? That is the least side effects, irritation, things of that sort. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're working on right now. We've brought it down to 2 candidate molecules. We had a list of 6 molecules, 6, whether it's a version of DMT or an analog of DMT. I mean, these are technicalities, but kind of a DMT, right? And we narrowed it down to 2. And we've ordered it. We've received it. Or Terasaki received it. Terasaki is the lab that's actually performing the work. And so they've been received. And so there are 2 cell types in the eye that have both of those receptors, right? So we're going to test both of those molecules on both of those types of cells. We've started on the first type of cell, and we're waiting for the results. The results should come in the next few weeks. And then we'll do on the second cell type. The second cell type is a little longer because you actually have to get a donor. You have to wait for a human eye that's healthy, that comes from from someone who passed away. So that it's a little harder to get your hands on that.
Right.
So it might take a month or 2 before we get that. So we want to test both cell types with both molecules, which will get us to the point where we can choose which molecule we want, which formulation we want to use to go forward. Then we do the animal study. And then once we have the animal study done, then we create the prototype. Because at the end, what we want to do is, one of the reasons why we're working with Terasaki is they're world experts at drug delivery mechanisms, right? So, some kind of device that you put in the eye, you can guess different types of eye things, that devices you put in the eye that would have a controlled, consistent release of the drug that we end up choosing.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
So that would be a constant, small, controlled, 24-hour release, whether that device stays in for a day or for a week or for a month. We haven't determined that yet. But once that happens, then you don't have to worry about, I forgot to put my drops in this morning. What happens in the middle of the night, so on and so forth. So if we can get, once again, to group it all together, the right device that gets that controlled, consistent release, and then the right molecule that has the best mix of potency, duration, and least irritation.
Yeah, it's the DMT. It's
so that's what we're on our way to. Right?
Yeah, I'm curious. Have you formulated, I guess, a way to negate the effects of a DMT-like analog? Because, as I said, it's a powerful drug. If so, maybe explain what some of those effects are. And it just blows my mind away to think what some of these compounds are doing from a neurological standpoint and how it's helping. We haven't even got started yet. We barely even know the benefits of what this is going to provide over the next decade or so. Glaucoma.
So we already have we're already of the view that that DMT has antioxidative and anti-inflammatory properties. So so to us it makes sense, and especially with the work that's been done that shows that these serotonin, they're actually serotonin receptors that respond to the DMT. So we already know of that. So the question becomes, which one, like I said, has the best potency and duration with the least, toxicity. Toxicity is the wrong word, but the least irritation. And
right.
So we've actually tested them already on the first. We didn't test the duration and effectiveness, but we wanted to see both molecules right away. Is it toxic? Is there toxicity? And the good news is that it's not. And so we feel that we can. It's always about what amount can you put in before you can see, a negative effect, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we had, a very, very, very high cutoff as to way higher than what we believe we need for effectiveness to check for the toxicity on the cell. And so we've done that. And at the highest level that we gave as a limit, there was no irritation or toxicity on either. So both of them so far seem good. Now it becomes a question of, which one has the best potency / duration. Once that's figured out in the dish, then you got to go do it in an animal, right? It'll probably be a non-human primate. I haven't designed that yet. It'll probably be some kind of monkey, realistically. And so that's something we're going to work on in 2022. So the next few weeks, we'll have the results from the first cell type. And then at some point in early new year, we should, depending on when we get access to that eye, to that donor, we should have results from the second cell type.
Can't believe how much this industry is just changing. It's just so much is continued learning. Fascinating stuff, to say the least. Appreciate you catching in with us, and let's catch up soon again, okay?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. Thanks, Daniel.
Thanks.